Shudder released a new teenage comedy horror this past weekend called Bloody Axe Wound, from the director behind the vampire rock band flick Uncle Peckerhead. And I have a few thoughts on it, and I'll get into them after this. Bloody Axe Wound is new streaming on Shudder. It's directed and written by Matthew John Lawrence. Life for Abby Bladecut, played by Sari Arambulo, is tough, being the adopted daughter of a serial killer, Roger Bladecut, played by Billy Burke, who has terrorized the town of Clover Falls for a very long time. Roger runs a video store which releases nothing but slasher movies, most of them featuring Roger himself doing his slasher thing to local teens. In this alternative universe, the videotapes of Roger's murder sprees just show up on the video store's doorstep, predicting the latest killing spree that seemingly never ends. Roger also has a magic yearbook where red circles appear around specific students, pointing him in the direction of his next victim. With Roger getting older, Abby is eager to take over for him as the town's serial killer, but Roger has doubts that a girl could evoke the amount of fear and terror needed for such a role. But when Roger gets laid up from an old wound, he gives Abby her chance to show her serial killer stuff, but instead, Abby meets Sam, Malik Brown, who she immediately feels an attraction to and is reluctant to kill. Therein lies the predicament. Should Abby fulfill her destiny and pick up the reins of her father's profession, or follow her heart and begin a relationship with Sam? Imagine if Jason somehow had a daughter. I guess that's not exactly a valid comparison with Bloody Axe Wound, since Jason is a silent killer and lacks the social skills to hook up with a lady friend. Billy Burke's Roger Bladecut speaks quite eloquently, and maybe he hasn't hooked up either, as Abby is adopted, a story that is left untold in this cute little twist on the slasher flick. Bloody Axe Wound is a good time if you don't think about it too hard. Once you get the premise, and it requires a mighty leap in logic to do so, as it is multi-tiered, not only do you have to buy that Bladecut lives in a town that is oblivious that he is living a normal life as a video store owner by day and masked slasher by night, but he also receives magic video cassettes predicting his murder sprees and has a magic yearbook predicting his victims. As long as you can buy that and don't ask too many questions like, how did Roger meet Abby? Why are they in this situation where the magic powers that be give Roger these videotapes? Why do the cops seem to turn a blind eye to all of this? Why do some people know about the existence of the killer and the video store and some don't? And most importantly, how does Abby think she can ever be a serial killer if she falls in love with her intended victim on the night of her first killing spree? I had a lot of questions like that, but I feel that the folks behind Bloody Axe Wound would simply say, "You're thinking too hard about this," which basically admits that they really didn't think too hard about this, and didn't flesh out the world the characters live in, and instead just get to the stuff that they felt was more important. And while these logical questions and maybe even geeky questions might pop up in the brain pans of horrorphiles like you and I don't think this film was intended for hardcore horror fans who like to get into that kind of stuff. This film is made for the newer, younger horror crowd, and that's okay. Not all horror has to be made specifically for me. I'd file this under the same category of recent teenage horror films like Freaky, Happy Death Day, It's a Wonderful Knife, and Totally Killer. And while I liked some of those films, Happy Death Day and Freaky, not all of them spoke to me, and a couple of them I found to be downright unwatchable. It's a Wonderful Knife and Totally Killer. I would put Bloody Axe Wound in the former category, as it does seem to target a younger audience, but it still manages to add some elements like the respect for 80s slashers, some solid gore, and the fun member berries the video store brought out of me. It also helps that our lead, Sari Arambulo, as Abby, is likable as all get out. She has this admiration for her pop that slasher fans can relate to. Not that we want to go out and kill, but just the kind of anti-hero worship slasher icons like Jason, Freddy, Michael, and Leatherface get from most fans of slasher flicks. Arambulo isn't obnoxious, and more importantly, she's not perfect. She's not correcting her father or putting him down for not being cool. Quite the opposite. She wants to follow in his footsteps. And while trying to do so, she actually fails and proves to be a pretty awful serial killer. By giving Abby these faults, it makes her infinitely more relatable and makes you want to root for her to succeed because we've seen her fail. More modern horror movies with female protagonists should take note. This is how you make your lead, male or female, likable. There are also some fun performances from the rest of the cast. Billy Burke is great as the serial killer who is just a skosh away from saying, "I'm too old for this shit." He's not ready to hang up the hockey mask yet, but man is he getting close, and I loved seeing him be both a vicious killer and a loving father at the same time. Yes, it's mostly played for comedic effect. Yes, this is supposed to be a heartwarming relationship, even though I feel it misses the landing in the end, but more on that later. Other standouts are Molly Brown, who is currently playing a young Deb in the most recent Dexter Origins season. She's cool and confident, and you can understand why Abby would fall for her. I also liked Abby's friend, Glenn, played by Eddie Levy, who supplies some pretty fun scenes while he's trying to land a big part in the movie being made around these killings. Though not all of his scenes land, the bulk of them provide some nice comic relief so things don't get too teenage angsty. The problem with Bloody Axe Wound is the script, which feels only half-cooked. I think many of the aforementioned questions should have been addressed. Anytime people are scratching their heads and trying to wrap their heads around the premise, it's a distraction from enjoying the movie itself. The movie does a decent job of not outright explaining the rules of the universe with boring discourse, but I do feel that not enough details were given. What happens if the movie doesn't turn out the way it plays out in the video? Why is Roger so adamant that his daughter is the killer when at first he doesn't want her to be one? Also, the stakes are never really established. Does it hurt Roger when Abby doesn't kill the intended victims? What happens if she doesn't do it? Does Roger die? And how did this scenario begin with the videotapes and the yearbook and all of that? There's just too much the audience is required to swallow and no explanation to make the meal smoother. I also think there was a missed opportunity having the videotapes just magically film the film rather than having a real film crew somehow recording all of this mayhem that's going on. Sure, it might have been a little bit closer to Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, but I think it would have answered a lot of these questions that I had. The biggest problem is that the film does resolve the problem between Abby and Sam's relationship, but it never really gets to address the issues between Abby and her father, Roger, which really lets you know what is important to the filmmakers. I can appreciate a good lesbian teen horror film as much as the next guy, but unfortunately, it's not something new, especially in this day and age. Sure, Abby is attracted to Sam, and that's a challenge for Abby as she is supposed to kill her, but the thing that makes this movie different is that it's about a serial killer and his daughter. And unfortunately, that relationship is never fleshed out enough, making the choice between Sam and her father no choice at all. In fact, the reluctance Roger had about his daughter not having what it takes to be a serial killer because she's a girl might not have been the most PC of concerns from Pop, but the way things turn out, it seems like he was right about it all. And I just don't think that's the intention this movie was going for. Bloody Axe Wound is from Matthew John Lawrence, who did another fun horror comedy a few years back called Uncle Peckerhead. That one felt a little more fully thought out than this one. Again, if you don't think too much about Bloody Axe Wound, it is a perfectly fine little teenage horror flick. It's even got some cool gross-out effects and a solid handling of action to keep the pace moving. But once you start asking questions and thinking a bit deeper than the surface level, the whole thing is going to fall apart on you. So I suggest just not straining your brain. It's fun and cute and occasionally gruesome. I especially love that the corpse of Grandma sits at the dinner table with them and has some great acting and fun cameos. And sometimes that's enough to get a recommendation from me. Have you guys seen this one? It's on Shudder. And what are your thoughts on the Shudder channel in general? Let me know down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be. Stuck